The first thing she decided about me was that I wasn't worth much, not because of what I said, not because of who I was, but because of my shoes. She smiled politely, leaned toward her son, and whispered the sentence that changed everything. "She looks like the help." I smiled back, because when people think you have nothing to offer them, they stop hiding who they are. And that night, I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to watch them fail a test they didn't know they were taking. My fiancé's mother didn't know that yet. She only knew what she thought she saw. A woman dressed simply, standing quietly in her entryway, easy to categorize and easier to dismiss. She didn't bother masking it. She didn't think she needed to. That was her first mistake. My name is Elena Wright. I was 32 years old at the time, and I had been keeping a secret for over a year. Not a careless secret, not an embarrassing one, a deliberate one. I earned just over $40,000 a month. I was a senior systems architect at one of the largest tech firms in the region. I'd been writing code since my teens, had sold my first product before most people finished college, and held patents that quietly paid for a very comfortable life. I spoke at industry conferences. I advised companies people recognized. I lived modestly because I wanted to, not because I had to. And the man I was engaged to believed I was barely getting by. I had never lied to him. I had simply allowed him to assume. When we met, I told him I worked in tech. He asked if I supported executives. I nodded vaguely. He filled in the rest on his own. People often do. I learned that from my grandmother, the woman who raised me after my parents died when I was a child. She lived simply, cooked basic meals, drove an old car, never spoke about money. When she passed, I discovered she had quietly built and sold a company worth millions. She left me a letter. I still remember the line that mattered most. A person's character is clearest when they think you have nothing to offer them. That lesson shaped my life. So when my fiancé invited me to his parents' estate, when he warned me his mother cared deeply about appearances, I made a decision. I would arrive exactly as they expected, unassuming, modest, ordinary. I would not correct their assumptions. I would observe them. This was not deception. This was clarity. I wanted to see how they treated someone they believed was beneath them, someone they thought they could dismiss, someone they assumed had no leverage, no influence, no power. Because I wasn't just deciding whether to marry a man, I was deciding whether to bind my life to his family. And families don't pretend forever. As I stood there in that grand entryway, beneath chandeliers chosen more for cost than taste, listening to a woman decide my worth based on my shoes, I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't going to hurt the way they expected. It was going to teach me everything I needed to know. Everything that followed, every word, every silence, every choice, was intentional. The house itself told a story before anyone spoke another word. It was large in the way money tries to announce itself. Long driveway, iron gates, landscaping so precise it looked rehearsed. Everything polished, everything expensive, everything designed to signal importance rather than comfort. I parked my old car at the edge of the circular drive and took a moment before getting out. Not because I was nervous, because I was paying attention. I knew exactly how I looked walking up to that door. Safe, small, non-threatening. The kind of woman people feel comfortable dismissing. That was the point. My fiancé met me just inside, greeting me with a kiss that felt oddly staged, like he was performing a role rather than expressing affection. His eyes flicked down to my dress, then back up to my face. There it was again, that brief tightening in his expression, embarrassment. He lifted his glass when his mother finished speaking, like punctuation. That was when I understood his silence wasn't discomfort, it was agreement. The entryway was immaculate and cold, filled with art chosen for price tags rather than meaning. Everything gleamed. Nothing felt lived in. This was a house meant to be admired from a distance, not inhabited. His mother led us in with the air of someone guiding guests through a museum she believed she owned entirely. Her movements were precise, controlled, every gesture measured. She asked polite questions with sharp edges beneath them. Where I was from, what my family did, what kind of work I had. I answered simply, truthfully, briefly. Small town, raised by my grandmother, worked in tech. Each answer landed exactly where I expected. I could almost see the categories forming in her mind. Unimpressive, manageable, temporary. This wasn't hostility yet. This was assessment. The kind that comes before permission is either granted or denied. Her daughter arrived late, sweeping into the room with loud confidence and louder jewelry. She barely looked at me when we were introduced. Her greeting was a single word, delivered without warmth, before she turned her attention elsewhere. That told me something too. People who feel secure don't need to diminish others so quickly. Dinner was announced, and we moved toward the table, long, formal, intimidating by design. The place settings were elaborate, excessive. More utensils than necessary, more ceremony than substance. I saw the smile flicker when I hesitated for half a second, registering the layout. It wasn't concern, it was satisfaction. This was the environment they used to establish dominance. At that table, I wasn't a future family member. I was an experiment. They spoke around me rather than to me. Conversations overlapped me. Decisions were made without acknowledging my presence. Compliments were backhanded. Curiosity was framed as pity. And my fiancé, the man who claimed to love me, stayed quiet. Not silent in protest, silent in comfort. He laughed at the right moments, shifted in his seat when tension sharpened, offered weak deflections that didn't interrupt the flow of judgment. He didn't correct assumptions. He didn't redirect cruelty. He let it happen. His mother answered questions directed at him without hesitation. His sister decided when the table laughed and when it went quiet. And every time someone looked to my fiancé for a response, he waited, just long enough to see which answer would keep the peace. That wasn't indecision. It was conditioning. This was not a family dynamic built on mutual respect. This was hierarchy, and I was at the bottom, exactly where they thought I belonged. That realization didn't hurt the way it should have, because by then I understood the shape of the evening. This wasn't about welcoming me. This wasn't about getting to know me. This was a test. And tests reveal far more about the people giving them than the ones taking them. I sat there calmly, answering when addressed, smiling when appropriate, offering nothing extra. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to impress them. I didn't push back. I let them show me who they were when they believed no consequences were attached. The test had begun. And they had no idea they were the ones being evaluated. The insults didn't arrive all at once. They came slowly, precisely, in layers. That was the clever part. If they had been outright cruel, it would have been obvious, easy to name, easy to confront. Instead, everything was wrapped in politeness and framed as concern, curiosity, or humor. The kind of cruelty that leaves you questioning, whether you're allowed to feel offended at all. His mother began with my background. She asked where I grew up, nodding faintly when I mentioned a small town, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. When I said my grandmother had raised me, her mouth tightened in a way that suggested absence rather than resilience. "That must have been difficult," she said, "growing up without guidance." I thanked her and told her my grandmother had given me everything I needed. She didn't respond to that. His sister leaned forward next, examining me with open curiosity now, like an object she'd decided wasn't dangerous. "And what did your grandmother do?" she asked. "A businesswoman," I said. That earned me a brief pause, a recalibration. "What kind of business?" "Small ventures," I said calmly. "Nothing exciting." The truth would have rearranged the entire table, but truth is only powerful when deployed intentionally. His sister smiled then, sharp, satisfied, and leaned back as if the mystery had been resolved. The conversation shifted to work. They asked what I did. I said I worked in tech. His mother tilted her head. "Oh, support work?" I didn't correct her. She nodded approvingly. Every organization needs people like that. People like that. I watched my fiancé out of the corner of my eye. He adjusted his napkin, took a sip of water, said nothing. That silence was louder than anything they said. Then came the comparison. His sister mentioned his ex casually, like she was discussing the weather, how accomplished she was, how well connected her family was, how perfectly she fit into their world. His mother picked it up eagerly. "She was wonderful," she said. "We all thought they'd end up together." Photographs lined the wall behind me. I hadn't noticed them until then. Family holidays, celebrations, milestones. In several of them, a beautiful woman stood beside my fiancé, her arm linked through his. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The message was clear. You are temporary. You are a deviation. You are not the plan. His mother leaned forward slightly, her voice softening into something almost kind. "I just hope you won't feel out of place," she said. "Not everyone is accustomed to this lifestyle." Out of place. That phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. His sister laughed quietly, the sound sharp and dismissive. "It's all a bit much for some people." I smiled, not tightly, not defensively, genuinely, because at that point I understood the rhythm of the evening. This wasn't conversation. This was erosion. They chipped away carefully, testing how much I would absorb without reacting. They wanted discomfort, apology, gratitude for being tolerated. And still, my fiancé said nothing. He shifted when things became too obvious. He offered half-hearted explanations that only reinforced the hierarchy. He never interrupted, never redirected, never corrected. I noticed everything. I noticed how his mother watched him when she spoke, checking for approval. How his sister smirked when he stayed silent. How relief passed through them when I didn't push back. They mistook composure for compliance. Then his mother said the word that changed everything. Common. She said it lightly, almost kindly, as if it were a neutral descriptor, as if it weren't loaded with judgment and certainty. "There's no shame in being common," she added. "Some people live very ordinary lives." Ordinary. Common. For a brief moment, I wondered if staying quiet had been a mistake, if silence had made me smaller instead of stronger. That moment passed. This wasn't misunderstanding. This wasn't concern. This was contempt. I looked at my fiancé, really looked at him, at the man who was supposed to be my partner. He met my eyes briefly. then looked away. That was the moment I stopped imagining excuses for him. Dinner continued, dessert arrived, conversation drifted, politeness resumed its surface role, but the damage had already been done. They had shown me exactly how they treated someone they believed had no leverage, and my fiancé had shown me exactly who he became when asked to choose between comfort and courage. I sat there calmly, listening, smiling when expected, speaking when addressed. Inside, something settled into place. The emotional discomfort of the evening had reached its limit. The next phase of the story was about to begin. After dinner, his mother announced coffees in the sitting room. It sounded casual, polite, social. It wasn't. It was a transition from performance to planning. The men drifted toward the windows to discuss business. His sister excused herself to take a call. His mother disappeared down the hallway, saying something about the staff. The room loosened the way it does when people believe the most important parts of the evening are already settled. I asked where the restroom was. My fiancé gestured toward the back of the house, distracted, already halfway into a conversation that didn't include me. I walked slowly down the hallway, past framed art and carefully curated wealth. The house felt even colder back there, quieter, like the space where real conversations happened once guests stopped being useful. That's when I heard voices, his mother's voice first, sharp, focused, stripped of politeness. "We need to deal with this," she said. His sister responded immediately. "I thought this was temporary. I thought he'd grow out of it." I stopped. I didn't lean closer out of drama or curiosity. I stayed still because instinct told me this mattered. They weren't talking about the evening. They were talking about me. His mother spoke again, lower now, controlled. "She cannot be allowed to complicate things." Complicate. His sister laughed softly. He was supposed to keep her occupied. That was the understanding. The words landed cleanly, efficiently, no emotion attached. Occupied. I felt my pulse slow rather than spike. Shock has a way of sharpening focus when you stop resisting it. His sister continued. "The timing is terrible. We need the Caldwell deal to go through." That name caught my attention. I had done my research. I knew the industry. I knew who the Caldwells were. Luxury imports, capital, influence. His mother sighed. "The dealerships can't survive another year without it. He knows that." Another pause. "Is he still seeing her?" his sister asked. "Yes," his mother said. "At least enough to keep her family interested." Enough. I leaned back against the wall, the floor beneath me suddenly steady in a way it hadn't been all night. This wasn't snobbery. This wasn't cruelty for entertainment. This was strategy. His sister clicked her tongue. "He's getting attached. That's the problem. He actually likes her." There was annoyance in her voice now, not concern. "She was supposed to be a placeholder," she added. Placeholder? That was the word that rewrote everything. For a second, I wondered how long I had been convincing myself I was choosing patience when I was really choosing comfort. The answer settled quickly. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, a role. His mother spoke again, decisive. "We'll announce the engagement, publicly commit him, then we'll manage the breakup later." "On what grounds?" his sister asked. His mother didn't hesitate. "We'll find something or invent it." I closed my eyes briefly, not because I was hurt, because the picture was complete. They weren't worried about me discovering the truth. They were worried about timing, leverage, optics. And they thought I was too insignificant to suspect anything. His sister laughed again. She's harmless. Honestly, she should be grateful he noticed her at all. That was when I stepped away from the door. My hands stayed still. I counted 3 breaths before moving, not to calm myself, but to make sure I remembered every word in the order it was said. The test had reached its conclusion. I finally understood the architecture of the situation, the family, the finances, the engagement, the silence. My fiancé wasn't trapped between me and his family. He was aligned with them. I went into the restroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't naive. She wasn't devastated. She was alert. I could confront them. I could expose everything right then. But exposure without preparation only gives people room to dismiss you. My grandmother's voice surfaced clearly in my mind. When someone underestimates you, they give you the advantage. They thought I was common. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was grateful to be included. They had no idea what they'd just handed me. I fixed my hair, smoothed my dress, adjusted my expression. When I returned to the sitting room, I was smiling. The performance was about to change. When I returned to the sitting room, the atmosphere had shifted. The furniture had been rearranged just slightly. The lighting felt more deliberate. His mother stood near the fireplace with her hands folded, her posture rehearsed into calm anticipation. His sister lingered near the wall, pretending to study a painting while watching everything. His father hovered by the doorway, uncomfortable, already aware that something was about to happen, whether he approved or not. And my fiancé stood in the center of the room, too centered, too prepared. When he turned and saw me, his face brightened in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. He took my hands, holding them a moment longer than necessary, performing affection for the audience he knew was watching. He started speaking. He talked about timing, about family, about how things hadn't been perfect, but how he knew what he wanted. He said his family could be difficult, but that love required patience. Every word was smooth, practiced, safe. Then he got down on one knee. The ring caught the light immediately, large, flashy, unmistakably chosen, for visibility rather than meaning. It looked impressive at a distance. Up close, it told a different story. The stone was cloudy, the setting uneven, the kind of ring meant to convince rather than endure. It matched the moment perfectly. Behind him, his mother smiled, not with joy, with relief. This was the plan. Public commitment first, control later. I understood it all in the space of a breath. They needed the engagement to buy time, to stabilize appearances, to keep other negotiations alive. I wasn't a partner. I was a placeholder with a deadline. And still I said yes, not impulsively, not emotionally, strategically. I watched his shoulders relax as the word left my mouth. The room responded instantly. Applause, approval, congratulations, delivered with varying degrees of sincerity. His mother stepped forward first, already talking about celebrations and announcements. His sister followed, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. His father shook his son's hand like a deal had just closed. My fiancé slid the ring onto my finger, his hands trembling slightly. He thought he'd won. What he didn't understand was that by underestimating me, they had locked themselves into a narrative they no longer controlled. I smiled. I accepted the congratulations. I played the role they needed me to play. Because from that moment on, everything changed. The engagement wasn't a promise, it was leverage. And while they were celebrating their successful maneuver, I was already planning how and when the truth would surface. Not in private, not in whispers, but in a way that could not be dismissed. They believed they were managing the situation. In reality, they had just given me access. The weeks that followed were quiet, not peaceful, not uncertain. Quiet in the way a room gets before something irreversible happens. I played my role flawlessly. The grateful fiancé, the agreeable presence, the woman who listened more than she spoke, and never seemed to notice the undercurrents swirling around her. I attended dinners, I accepted comments, I smiled through condescension. They mistook restraint for ignorance. I created folders before I created conclusions. Dates before accusations, patterns before names. My career had trained me for this moment. I spent my days dismantling complex systems, identifying weaknesses, tracing failures back to their source. Businesses, like software, leave patterns. Debt leaves trails. Desperation always shows itself if you look long enough. The first thing I confirmed was what I had already overheard. The family business was not stable. On paper, the dealerships looked respectable, long-standing, regionally successful. But once I followed the numbers, instead of the branding, the truth surfaced quickly. Overexpansion, aggressive borrowing, declining margins disguised by short-term liquidity. They weren't growing, they were surviving, and barely. Their primary manufacturer agreement was under review. Sales targets were slipping, credit lines were stretched thin. The Caldwell partnership wasn't a strategic opportunity, it was a lifeline. Then I found something else. At first it looked insignificant. Minor discrepancies in expense reports. Small personal charges coded as operational costs. Nothing dramatic enough to raise immediate alarms. But patterns don't lie. I traced them backward, month by month, year by year. The numbers added up. Hundreds of thousands siphoned quietly from the company, routed through personal accounts, hidden inside vague reimbursements and shell expenses. The paper trail was sloppy in the way entitlement often is. They hadn't expected scrutiny. The name attached to most of it was his sister's. I printed everything, screenshots, statements, timelines. I organized it the same way I organized every professional project. Clean, undeniable, chronological. Then I started making calls. My grandmother's name still carried weight in certain circles. She'd built relationships slowly, carefully, never loudly. When I reached out, people remembered. They were willing to talk. That's how I found Daniel Harper. He was a former business associate of the family. Officially, a friend. Unofficially, someone they had pushed aside when he stopped being useful. He knew their habits, their shortcuts, their arrogance. When I showed him what I'd found, he didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. He filled in gaps I hadn't seen yet. Old deals that skirted ethics without crossing legality. Partners quietly burned. Agreements rewritten after handshakes. A pattern of behavior that relied on reputation to shield reality. He had been waiting for leverage. I had brought it. Meanwhile, my fiancé was unraveling in ways he didn't realize I noticed. His phone never left his hand. Notifications silenced. Conversations stepped away from. His affection became performative, exaggerated in public, distracted in private. I didn't accuse him, I observed. One evening I told him I'd be working late. Instead, I parked across the street from a restaurant he claimed he'd be meeting a client at. He wasn't meeting a client, he was meeting her. They sat close, too close. His hand rested over hers on the table. Her laughter came easily. Familiarity wrapped around them like muscle memory. I took photographs, not for revenge, for clarity. because I wanted to remember exactly who he chose to be when he thought no one was watching. I went home, filed the images away, and added them to the growing archive. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about completion. Daniel and I met several more times, quietly coordinating. He shared his documentation, I shared mine. We confirmed timelines, cross-referenced facts, removed speculation entirely. Truth didn't need embellishment. By the time the engagement party approached, everything was ready. The financial collapse was mapped. The romantic betrayal was documented. The ethical failures were undeniable. All that remained was timing. They believed they were controlling the narrative. They believed the engagement had stabilized their world. In reality, they had given me a stage. And I was patient enough to wait for the moment when the truth would land where it couldn't be contained, explained away, or buried. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I prepared. The night of the engagement party arrived quietly. Not with nerves, with certainty. I stood in my apartment and opened the door to a part of my life I had kept intentionally private. The dress I chose wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was tailored, deliberate, unmistakable to anyone who understood quality. The jewelry was restrained but precise. Pieces that didn't announce wealth, only fluency. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing to correct a misconception. I arrived alone, pulling up to the estate in the same modest car I'd driven every other time. The valet hesitated when he saw me, scanning for a catering badge that didn't exist. I handed him my keys without comment. That hesitation followed me as I walked across the lawn. The party itself was immaculate. White tents, soft lighting, live music drifting over manicured grass. Everything curated to suggest permanence, success, and control. None of it was real. The first ripple came when guests noticed me. Not recognition, confusion. They looked from my face to my dress and back again, recalculating. I could see assumptions collapsing in real time. Whispers followed. Phones came out discreetly. Names were checked. Good. I moved slowly through the crowd, greeting people politely, confidently, never explaining. Each interaction added pressure to a narrative the family had built without my consent. His father noticed next. He froze mid-greeting when he saw me, his expression shifting through surprise, doubt, and something like concern. He congratulated me stiffly, eyes lingering on details he couldn't reconcile with the version of me he'd accepted. Then his mother saw me. Her smile faltered for half a second. That was all it took. She recovered quickly, she always did, but the damage was done. Her gaze swept over me, cataloging everything she'd dismissed weeks earlier. The recognition wasn't immediate. It crept in slowly, unwelcome and destabilizing. Her daughter appeared beside her moments later, following the invisible pull of unease. Her reaction was less controlled. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. She spoke first. "That's an interesting dress." I named the designer casually, mentioned he'd made it for me. The color drained from her face. I excused myself before she could respond. By then, the room was alive with speculation. Conversations paused when I passed. People leaned closer to one another. I felt the shift happen, the moment when curiosity becomes concern. My fiancé found me near the bar. He looked unsettled, not angry, not confused, threatened. He asked what was going on, why people were staring, why I looked different. I told him I looked like myself. He didn't like that answer. I took his arm and guided him toward a group of industry leaders he'd always deferred to. When I introduced myself properly, full name, professional role, the reaction was immediate. Recognition, respect. One of them smiled and said he'd heard of my work. Another asked if I was related to my grandmother. That was when I felt him tense. He had never asked, never looked, never thought it mattered. The lie he'd built his comfort on was collapsing publicly, and his family could feel it. Across the lawn, I caught his mother watching us. Her posture stiffened. Her smile was gone now, replaced by calculation. She was trying to regain control of a situation that no longer belonged to her. The transformation wasn't dramatic, it was worse. It was quiet, undeniable, and irreversible. The story they'd told about me was unraveling. Not because I contradicted it, but because the truth was stepping into view on its own. The stage was set, and the audience was ready. The music faded without announcement. No one noticed exactly when it stopped, only that the space had gone unnaturally quiet. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips, attention pulled forward as if guided by instinct rather than instruction. His father stepped onto the small stage first, microphone in hand, smiling the smile of a man who believed the night was under control. He welcomed everyone, thanked them for coming, spoke about family, legacy, and exciting futures. The words sounded rehearsed because they were. Then his mother joined him. She took the microphone with confidence, her posture flawless, her voice warm and composed. She spoke about her son, about love, about how proud she was of the woman he'd chosen. She hinted at partnerships and growth, at promising developments just over the horizon. She was selling stability. She gestured toward my fiancé, calling him forward. He climbed the steps stiffly, scanning the crowd until he found me. His expression was strained now, uncertainty bleeding through the confidence he'd worn earlier. Then she said my name. The crowd turned as one. I walked forward slowly, deliberately, each step steady. The whispers intensified, then died. I could feel the weight of attention settle, heavy and absolute. She handed me the microphone with a smile that had begun to crack at the edges. She expected gratitude, reassurance, compliance. I took the microphone. I thanked her. I thanked the family for welcoming me so generously over the past weeks. I thanked them for showing me their home, their traditions, their values. The crowd leaned in. I said that when I first visited this house, I made a decision. I said I chose to arrive without credentials, without signals of status, without anything that might influence how I was treated. I said I wanted to see how they would treat someone they believed had nothing to offer them. The silence sharpened. I described that first dinner, the comments, the assumptions, the comparisons to someone deemed more suitable, the moments when politeness slipped and judgment showed its face. I said I had been called common. His mother's smile froze completely. I said that I understood now why those words had come so easily, because the family believed worth was measured in leverage and appearance, because they believed kindness was optional when power felt secure. I paused, then I said I hadn't meant to overhear a conversation later that evening. His sister shifted near the back of the tent. I said I heard plans discussed, calmly, casually, about how I would be removed once I had served my purpose. I said I learned I was a placeholder, a convenience, a distraction while other arrangements were made. Gasps rippled outward. I turned slightly and looked at my fiancé. I said I had trusted him, that I had given him opportunities to be honest. that he had chosen silence and deception instead. I lifted my phone. The image appeared on the screen behind us, clear, unambiguous. Two people leaning toward each other at a restaurant table, his hand over hers. I said the photograph had been taken while he told me he was working late. He reached for my arm. I stepped away. I said there was more. I explained that once I understood the situation, I had done what I always did when faced with complexity. I researched, I followed records, I examined patterns. I said the family business was not thriving, that it was overextended, indebted, and dependent on a partnership that had not yet been secured. His father's face drained of color. I said I had discovered something else as well. I turned and looked directly at his sister. I said company funds had been siphoned over several years, disguised as expenses, reimbursements, and operational costs. I said the total was significant, enough to matter. She shouted that it was a lie. That was when Daniel Harper stepped forward. He introduced himself calmly. He said he had documentation, years of it. He handed a folder to the manufacturer's representative, who had already moved closer to the stage. The representative didn't argue. He flipped pages. The moment stretched. Then he nodded once. That single gesture said more than words ever could. I removed the ring from my finger. The diamond caught the light harshly now, revealing its flaws without mercy. I held it up briefly, then placed it in my fiancé's hand. I said I would not be marrying him. I said I had never intended to once I understood the truth. I said the only reason I accepted his proposal was to allow the truth to surface where it could no longer be hidden. I told him to give the ring to the woman he had been seeing all along. His mouth opened, closed, no words came. I turned back to the crowd. I said my name again. I said what I did for a living. I said I lived simply by choice. I said wealth had never been the point. Character was. I said the family had shown me exactly who they were when they believed I didn't matter. I said they had mistaken restraint for weakness and politeness for ignorance. I said that mistake would cost them far more than my silence ever could. Then I set the microphone down. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for reaction. I walked off the stage. Behind me, the evening collapsed. Voices rose. Phones came out. Conversations fractured. The narrative they had curated shattered publicly and irreversibly. I didn't look back. The story didn't end that night. It unraveled quietly afterward, exactly the way truth usually does. Within days, the manufacturer terminated its agreement with the family's dealerships, citing concerns about financial management and ethics. Without that partnership, the business couldn't function. Showrooms emptied, credit tightened, investigations began. The sister stepped down temporarily. The word didn't matter. The damage was permanent. I wasn't mentioned in any article by name. I had made sure of that. I didn't want recognition. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted resolution. One morning, a week later, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and read the headline on my phone. It confirmed everything I already knew. Their empire hadn't collapsed because of me. It collapsed because it had been hollow long before I arrived. My phone buzzed shortly after. A message from my former fiancé. He said he wanted to explain. He said he had made mistakes. He said he still cared. I read it once, then I deleted it. Some doors don't need closure. They just need distance. I went to work that day like any other, logged into meetings, solved problems, lived the life I had built quietly, deliberately, without asking permission. That night, I stood by my window, the city lit below me, and thought about my grandmother, about the lesson she left me with. Worth isn't proven by wealth, it's revealed by behavior. They thought the story ended when I walked away, but the truth is it ended much earlier, the moment they decided I was insignificant. Because people who rely on status instead of character always collapse under their own weight. I didn't win because I was richer. I didn't win because I was smarter. I won because I stayed quiet long enough to see the truth clearly, and patient enough to let it reveal itself. If this story resonated with you, it's probably because you've been underestimated too. So don't rush to explain yourself. Don't rush to prove anything. Stay observant. Stay composed. Let people show you who they are. And when they do, believe them. Some people mistake silence for weakness. Others learn, eventually, that it was never silence at all.